All right. Well, welcome to those of you that are attending this session or watching it after the fact. My name is Sierra Kinslow, and I serve as the Associate Director of Admissions at Messiah University, which is located in Pennsylvania. Part of my day-to-day work is working with international students. So I'm really excited to chat with you all today and talk a little bit about how you find your home away from home. I know coming to college or even the college search process can be stressful, and there's a lot of things to consider for any student, but especially for international students and your families when you're considering flying across several oceans and time zones to get to your institution. I think there's kind of the added pressure or need to make sure you have this place where you can call home for 4 years or for however long you plan on studying at that institution. So I have a couple of slides just to share with you all to give you kind of a general overview. And then we will have plenty of time at the end for questions. So if I say something during the presentation that you want to follow up on, definitely jot that down or put it in the chat, and we will definitely get to it at the end. All right, so as we kind of think about what your college experience is going to look like and what this journey looks like across the globe, there are a few, I think, challenges for me anyway that come to mind when I think of what my international students and their families are going through. And I think the first big thing is the lack of your traditional supports. So where you are, you have your family, you have your friends that you've probably grown up with for a long time. You have teachers that you've gotten to know, especially over your high school years, and you know where to go when you have questions. And so when you kind of displace yourself from your supports that you know, it can be kind of daunting to think, well, now where do I go if I have questions, or who do I talk to if I'm struggling? And so I think that lack of traditional support can definitely be a barrier for international MK TCK students. The other piece of that is also culture shock. Coming to the US, whether it's your first time or even if you've been before, even if you're a US citizen living abroad, even though you might have that US citizenship, you may have lived abroad for most of your life. So coming to the US even still might feel like a culture shock. And so beyond the food and smells and those kinds of things, I think even when you think of the classroom environment, depending on the school you went to, there might be different expectations of what class participation is like, or how many assignments or papers and things you have. So I think that that third option listed there, the mismatched expectations, kind of goes hand in hand with this idea of culture shock and being in a place that is very different from what you know and what you're familiar with. So these are definitely some of the barriers and challenges that I think a lot of students face, and is definitely part of the decision-making process as you're looking for colleges and universities to attend. And so as you think about some of these things that I talked about, whether that's your social network, your family, or even just academic resources, when you go to a new place, typically you're looking for people that match either identically or are very similar to your cultural as well as your social identity. And so, for example, I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, and that area there is a very diverse area. As a woman of color, I was definitely looking for a place where I saw people that looked like me and could understand some of the phrases that I say or some of the experiences that I've had. And so I think speaking to that cultural piece, I think that is definitely something that students look for in their college, university search process. And then beyond kind of your demographic identity, I think there's the other part of your social identity where it's the clubs you're involved in, the kinds of music you listen to, and some of those things that you might do with your free time, and how you kind of navigate your life socially, like outside of the classroom. So whether that is athletics or musical theater, making sure you're finding a college and university that has some of those opportunities so that you have that outlet. And even though you are on the other side of the world, there is that piece of your day-to-day life that feels familiar, that feels like when you're on the stage or when you're on a court or a soccer field, you feel like, oh, this is a place where no matter where I am in the world, like I can thrive. And so when you're looking for that college and university, it is about finding people that, this quote says, finding people that are your kind of crazy, or finding people that get you, that understand what you're going through. But at the same time, finding a people and a place that will make you better and encourage you to grow. And so these are all things to consider in the process. So we've kind of talked a little generally, and now we'll go into a few tips that I have for you and your journey as you're trying to navigate all of this. First big thing, I would say, obviously you're on the other side of the world, so probably online resources are probably the best thing for you to start with. A lot of institutions have great information on their website that you can find. And so definitely take advantage of all of that, whether that is just searching for the kinds of clubs that they offer or what kinds of majors that they offer. And again, those opportunities that will speak to your identity and who you are, and making sure that institution has those opportunities for you. And then the next step, kind of beyond the online portion of your research, I definitely encourage you to talk to someone live. So whether that is, if you have the opportunity to be in the US or in the region where you're looking at schools, sign up for a campus visit. Being on campus, I think, is a great way to get a feel for if this institution is a good fit for you. But I also understand that that might not be feasible for some of you, and your first time on campus might be the day that you arrive for orientation, and that is totally fine too. But definitely sign up for a Zoom call with your admissions counselor or with someone at that institution. And these live conversations can apply to your admissions counselor, faculty, a coach if you're interested in playing sports, or even some current students. I think talking to current international MKTC students can be a great way to kind of get the inside scoop of what it's like to be a student on that campus and how those students see themselves thriving on that campus community. And then when you're kind of in those conversations or looking on the websites, ask all of the questions that you have. Don't feel like you're too much of a burden, or, oh, this question might be dumb, or I don't know if they'll understand what I'm asking for. As an admissions counselor myself, I will say I am here for all of the questions. That is literally what my job is. So never feel afraid to ask. And if I don't know the answer, I can always point you to the person that does know the answer. So as an admissions counselor, we're kind of like the go-between between all of the resources and departments on our campus, and we'll get you connected to where you need to be. So as you consider all of this, as you're navigating your college journey, whether you're looking online or talking with someone live, there are a couple of things that I encourage you to ask, or things that you might want to look for on the website as you're trying to figure out if this is a place that you can call home. One of those things that you can look for is the number of international students or students of color that that campus has. I know, Messiah, we have that information posted on our website, but it might be a little bit difficult to find. So if you do get into a live conversation with a student or a staff member at that institution, just ask them what percentage or how many students they have on that campus that identify as international or even students of color. And I think a cool follow-up question is to ask if there's one particular region that they get a lot of their international students from. I know for Messiah, we get a lot of students from Southeast Asia. And so when I am able to travel and I go to Malaysia, I can say, oh, I can name this many students that are currently on our campus from this same area. And that can almost be a sense of, oh, so there will be people there that understand me, that get me, and I can have that sense of community even in some random place in the US. So that could be a good good question, good thing to research for these institutions. Another question that I definitely encourage you to ask is if that institution has an office or a person on campus that is specifically dedicated to supporting international MK and TCK students. So whether that's a whole office of international student programs, or even if it's just one or two people that are dedicated to kind of your service, making sure that there are people there that will support you, and that people that are specifically, I would say, educated on what it's like to be an international student at a college or university. Of course, institutions have like academic supports and faculty advising and all of that, but I think having someone who really understands what you're going through and the barriers that you might face is just kind of an added layer of support that can make that campus feel like a safe place for you. And if this institution does have an office or a person like that, ask what kinds of supports they offer. Do they offer early orientation for international and MK students? Do they offer visa advising? So for those of you that might need a student visa to come to campus, there are a lot of government rules and regulations that go into making sure you stay in status. So asking if that institution offers support along those lines can just relieve some of the pressure of you having to manage that all on your own. You can ask if they offer places to stay during winter breaks or summers. As you're thinking about some of those breaks in the school year, a lot of domestic students will just go home because they can drive there or their parents can come pick them up. But that might not be the case for you if you're living on the other side of the world. So asking what that process looks like for the summers and breaks can be a good way of gauging the institution's level of hospitality. I think that was something for me that really sold me on Messiah, was that I felt like the institution and my admissions counselor would bend over backwards to make sure I had what I needed. And I think that if you find that hospitality, that sense of grace, and yes, we'll work with you, we'll figure it out. We have friendship families we can put you with, or we allow international students to stay on campus for the summers and winter breaks. Seeing that level of hospitality can be a great way to see if that institution can be that home and that safe place that you're used to having. The other couple of questions that I think would be helpful as you're trying to find this home is looking into the student clubs and organizations. Like I mentioned earlier, having that social identity and having those places where you can thrive and play the sport that you love or perform, or even just be around people from similar cultures or similar experiences can be a good way to create that sense of home. And so some schools, a lot of schools really have like a international student organization where they are able to get all of the international MK students together, and you all can talk about the different experiences you've had or put on a performance for your campus and celebrate the cultures that you come from. And so that could be a good way to also gauge whether this place is a homey, safe place for you. And then lastly, I think a more general question you could ask is just about the campus community and the campus climate. I know there's a lot of social unrest in the US that might be portrayed differently depending on what region you're coming from. So don't be afraid to ask what the campus climate is like at the school that you're interacting with, especially if you know that you don't have family in the US that could maybe give you a kind of inside scoop to what they're seeing. Definitely reach out to your admissions counselor or to whoever you're speaking with and ask about what the climate is like. You definitely don't want to go to a place that is like openly hostile towards international students or people from different cultures. You want to be a place that is culturally inclusive, diverse, and that sees the value in people of other cultures and other backgrounds. And that'll just make you feel so much safer. It'll help your family feel secure in sending you halfway around the world to go to school. So don't be afraid to ask those kinds of questions. It might feel a little uncomfortable, but you have every right to make sure you're going to a place that will serve you well, and will be a place where you can thrive for your 4 years or however long you're enrolled. So that's kind of my general advice as you're going through your college search and university process. The last thing I'll say, I love this quote from Steve Jobs, where he says, if you haven't found it yet, keep looking. Don't settle. When it comes to matters of the heart, you'll know it when you find it. And so I know that the college and university search process can be stressful, and you might just want it to be over as soon as possible. But I definitely encourage you that if you haven't found a place that you feel like you can thrive, be successful, and call home, keep looking. There are thousands and thousands of institutions out there. And so just because the first 10 that you look at aren't the one for you, keep looking. You can talk to friends that you also know who have gone to the States for school and ask them about their experience. Or again, talk to some current international students at these institutions, and get a sense for what their experience is like. But yeah, definitely don't settle. This is a long time for you to be in school, and you're spending a lot of money for this experience. So you want to make sure you're getting the most out of it. So that's my spiel. I also put my contact information here. So if you have follow-up questions or don't want to ask your question here, you are welcome to email me. And that number is a WhatsApp number. So if you have WhatsApp, feel free to reach out. But again, if there's anything I can do to support you in your college search process, feel free to reach out. I know we have plenty of time here for some questions.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and keep watching this, but okay. I'll jump in with a question. You had a couple really, I took a whole page full of notes because I'm learning quite a bit today, but how's the best way to find some current students to connect with, to really start engaging and start to ask those? Because I mean, I think there's some amount of skepticism about, asking a school official, because, they're always going to paint the best light and all that. And if you really want the real answers, right? Mm-hmm. No, I think that, like I said, it's a more of a misconception than anything, because I think all of our professionals are very, because they want the fit to work both ways, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, they want to find the kid that's going to make themselves at home here, and they don't want to mislead that in any way. So, but how can they find people beyond, the people on the website or on the contact page?
Yeah. So I know on our international student page, we do have a tab of current student contact information. So that could be a good way. I know also a lot of our student organizations are on Instagram. So if you do find that the institution you're looking at has an international student association, follow them on Instagram and DM them. I know our students love talking to prospective students, so that could be a kind of organic way of getting some information from current students that are also international MK students. And if you don't find any of those, you can, again, ask your admissions counselor or whatever staff person you're talking with if they have contact information for anyone. I think that would probably be the most straightforward way of getting there, because I'm sure we've obviously recruited several classes of international students. So we have people we can connect you with, and we can even connect you based on major or region or even school that you're from or something like that. So don't be afraid to ask. But if you want something a little bit more organic and kind of on the student side, check out Instagram and see if you can find the page for their International Student Association.
Yeah, and beyond that, I think social media is so great on every club and organization almost has their own way of communicating and promoting themselves, right? So like the girls soccer team, the boys soccer team, the the theater club, they don't even have to be sports, they can be clubs, they can be organizations, but almost all of them will have their own presence in some way. It might be just Twitter, it might be Instagram, it might be combination of everything, and I think that's a is an important thing for families to be thinking about and following these groups. Even if you don't plan on playing a sport, I think it's still a great way to kind of capture maybe the essence of the community and kind of what they say about themselves beyond the official, school page, if you will. We do have one question, which is interesting. I'm not sure how you're going to exactly answer it, but how is the weather during the spring season?
Oh, good question. So in Pennsylvania, I would say it really depends on the year. I feel like our spring season is probably the shortest season, because I feel like winter kind of drags on for a really long time. And then we have a few weeks of spring where it's kind of cool outside, like you could maybe just wear like a sweater or a light jacket, and really enjoy like being out in the sun. And then it switches to summer really fast, where it's like hot. And I know I personally don't like the summer, so I feel like it always comes too quickly. But yeah, I would say the spring is usually cool. The trees start to get their leaves back, flowers start to bloom. It's a really pretty season. But yeah, it's often pretty short.
Yeah, and just to answer that on a more universal answer, to representing more of our North American delegation here of universities, I think that's something international students need to think about. Are you looking for four distinct seasons throughout the year? Then you want to pick a geography of North America that will, satisfy that. There are pockets of our country that are pretty tropical year round, pretty mild. So if you don't want to play in the snow, think about that. If you welcome the idea of playing in the snow and all that has, then look at those parts of the country and Canada as well. So it's a hard to answer that, I guess, and probably not a very satisfactory answer to the person who asked it. But of course, in Pennsylvania, you're right. It's a little bit shorter, a lot wet. Sometimes you're going to get something that feels like a throwback to winter, and you're going to feel days that feel like it's glimpse of summer. That is the transition of spring. So another question was asked: are there a lot of Africans in Messiah?
Oh, good question. So to give you some context about kind of our campus community as a whole, so Messiah has about 2,700 undergraduate students. And only about 4% of those students are international MK TCK students. And then we have another like 15 to 18% of domestic students of color. And so when it comes to international students who come from an African country, we do have a few. I know this past fall, we enrolled 5 students from Africa. Kind of from all over the continent. And so I would say it's definitely not the largest international population on our campus, but we do have African students here. And in addition, in the US, for people who might be US citizens, but their ancestors come from the African continent, we call them African Americans. And so they would be in that like 16 to 18% that I mentioned earlier, of people who are of darker complexion, have a different cultural background, and could maybe speak to some of the experiences that you've maybe had. And we have an International Student Association, but we also have an African Student Association. So if you're interested in getting plugged in with people who are from the same area, can really understand some of your cultural expressions and things like that, there are definitely outlets for that here.
Another question: does it take long to change courses?
I have a couple of ways that I'm interpreting your question, so I'm going to kind of address them all. But if you're like talking about like changing major and changing kind of the route that you're going with your degree, that is definitely an option. I know a lot of students change their major at some point during their 4 years. I'd say it's probably pretty rare for a student to pick one major when they enroll and stick with it all 4 or 5 years. So it is an easy process. It's just something you need to chat about with your academic advisor, and they can kind of walk you through the process of filling out the paperwork, talking with the registrar's office, all of that. But that change can be made pretty quickly. If you're asking about like the individual classes that you're taking and wanting to either add an extra one or drop it, you can do that. There is a small window where that's allowed to happen towards the beginning of the semester, because if you get too far into the semester and try to hop into another class, you've missed so much already. So I think it's within the first like 2 or 3 weeks of classes, you're allowed to drop a class, switch into a different one. But you only register for classes one semester at a time. So you're really only in that class for 14 to 15 weeks before you register for the next semester. So hopefully that kind of answers your question. If not, feel free to chat again. Hopefully that got at what you were looking for.
I think it also depends on what are you changing it from and to.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
obviously to change, especially in regards to your major. I mean,
Right.
to go from one science type to another science type is obviously a lot less dramatic of a course load shift
Right.
than, you know, going from, say, fine arts to a science or something like that, right? I mean, I think
Absolutely.
that's a really loaded question. But yeah, I think you answered it both ways. I'm not, again, I'm not sure either how to interpret the question, but yeah, it all depends. But certainly every semester has a good 2 or 3 week grace period where you could really get to know what the course expectations are, you know, the professor's teaching style and all that. So you certainly can change course in those first few weeks relatively easily. And I think that's a universal truth, regardless of the university in question. I think that's all of the ones that have come through, but I kind of had a question. I just wanted to, and I'm not giving you any warning at all, so I apologize. But you mentioned earlier culture shock, and I just wondered if you wanted to expand upon that, just some of the things that kind of entails, like either personal experience or things you've heard about of what exactly could some of those things be.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. So I think culture shock can come on a variety of levels. It can be something as simple as like, oh, the food here isn't what food is like at home, or the weather here is a lot different than at home. It could be your like social interactions. So whether you feel like people at the university are like overly friendly or kind of standoffish, depending on what you're used to in your culture, it could feel a lot different being in the US. It could also be, I find a lot of international students struggle a little bit in that first semester with like academic expectations. And like one of my students this year from Southeast Asia, she was really struggling with the amount that the professor like wanted her to participate in class, because the school that she came from was very much a lecture format. Like you come, you sit, you listen, you don't really speak, and like you do your work and turn it in and you're fine. But at least at our institution, there's a lot of feedback that professors want. They want you to participate in class. And so that was kind of a shock for her. And so, yeah, I think it can come on a lot of levels depending on what your experience was like where you are, or where you currently live. And so just being aware that there are a lot of things that might feel a little bit different, and that's okay. Everyone is kind of going through that. So I grew up in the US, so my education system was very similar. I kind of knew what I was getting into coming to Messiah. But I think for me, the part of my experience that I would say was a little bit of a culture shock for me was the faith side of Messiah. So I grew up in a faith-based home, school, church, like I did all of that growing up. But my growing up experience was very one-sided, like this is kind of what you believe, this is what we expect you to believe. And then like that was it. There was no conversation about it. But then coming to Messiah, our students and staff represent a lot of different denominations and walks of the Christian faith. And that's probably true of a lot of the NACAP institutions that you might be looking at during this couple of weeks. But at least at Messiah, they don't push one denomination or another. When I was taking my Bible and theology class, they kind of present all of the ways of viewing a particular issue or a particular topic. And then they encourage you to kind of do the internal work to figure out how you interpret it or what it is that you believe. And so I think that was definitely a shock. And like, I didn't know what to do with all of that, like freedom and autonomy to discover and ask questions. So yeah, that was definitely a bit of a shock for me. And it might be for some of you too, depending on the school or the home that you come from.
We have a couple more here. So one person asked, do students from different countries often hang out with one another, or is it sometimes just grouped?
Yeah, I'd say that it's a little bit of both. I think especially at the very beginning of the semester, I think students from particular regions do gravitate towards each other because they're like hungry and yearning for that sense of familiarity. But I also think that international MK-TCK students also kind of all gravitate towards each other regardless of the region that they're from, because they're all having very similar experiences. So whether you're from the African continent or from somewhere in Asia, you both flew really far to get here. You both are away from family, away from what you're familiar with. So there is some camaraderie in that shared experience. And so I think you will find people on campus that, again, either come from the same country or the same area as you, and it'll feel good to be around them sometimes. But I am sure you will hang out with a lot of people from other countries or even people from the US that you either meet in classes or on your floor. So there will be some of that kind of intermingling as well too.
Yeah, I think your community becomes the groups you get involved in. Like you said, your living arrangements, so your roommate or floor mates, I think become that second community as well.
Yeah.
Another question, how often do you attend chapel during the week?
So that will depend on the school that you're attending. Speaking specifically about Messiah, so we require students to go to 14 chapels in a semester, and that semester is about 14 or 15 weeks. So really you only have to go to one chapel a week, but we offer chapel 3 times a week. So if you want to kind of load up on those 3 chapels for the first several weeks of class and get it all done within the first 4 or 5 weeks of class, you can do that. Or if you want to spread it out, you can go to 1 a week and be fine by the end of the semester. But yeah, that requirement will look different depending on which school you're looking at.
The 3 that are offered per week, are those difference in topics or styles or denominational backgrounds? What is the?
Yeah. So I would say the topics and like the speakers that we have are different depending on which one you go to. So like our Tuesday morning chapel feels a lot like a congregational church service. Like it's our main chapel, and it's several hundred students, and you'll sing some worship songs, hear from either a campus pastor or a local pastor. The Tuesday evening chapels are more discussion based. So if you like these Q&A kinds of opportunities or being able to just talk with the speaker about their area of expertise, some students gravitate towards that one. And then Thursdays are small groups that happen around campus. So different departments run those. Some of them are related to majors. Some are related to like our service opportunities. Our athletics department does one on like Christian formation and kind of your like your character on the field or court or whatever sport you play. So yeah, the small groups on Thursday are really popular for students because you have like 20 to 30 different topics you can choose from, and you go to whichever small group you're interested in. So yeah, you have a lot of flexibility.
That's excellent. Another question, what are the dorms like?
Yeah, well, I would say the easiest way to get a sense of what they're like is to check out the website of the school you're applying to. I know for Messiah, we have videos and photos of the dorm, so you can actually see it, because it's kind of hard to explain it. But I would say for us, we have two different kinds of housing options. So we have the traditional like dorm where you live with one other person in your room, and then there's a like a communal bathroom on each floor, where there's like 6 or 7 showers and toilet stalls and sinks and things like that. And then for upperclassmen students, we have apartments on campus. And so there you'll live with 3 to 4 other people, and you have your own kind of bedrooms, kitchen, living room, bathroom for that group of 3 to 5 people in that apartment. So yeah, those are kind of the two options. Definitely check out our website if you want to see like what the furniture looks like and kind of the structure of the halls and things like that. But yeah, that's kind of a quick overview.
Yeah, and I think every school is going to be different. Every university is going to be different. But yeah, the great thing about technology is almost every university has pictures or videos, or sometimes you'll even find somebody that does like a floor map, like a kind of an outline to give you a sense of space. I'm not sure if it's a culture shock or not, but I think even domestic students would say that it's probably not exactly what they expected, just because it's different than, living at home, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a completely different way of living, right? You now have to figure out your own meals, and you usually have to, go to an eating area. It's not like you come down from your bedroom and mom's made dinner, right? I mean, it's a little different than that. So another question, what are your club organizations and societies like?
Yeah, so we have over 70 different student organizations and clubs that you can join. Everything from like performing groups like choirs, theater groups. We also have an outdoors club. We have club and rec sports. We have a lot of student organizations that are specific to different majors. So like I know we have a nursing association for our students that are in the nursing program. Our nutrition and dietetics major has a group called Snack, where they kind of bring awareness to the different foods that you're eating, and they'll often have like tables kind of set up around campus for you to try some things that they've made. Our psychology program has a group called Minds Matter, where they do a lot of promotion on mental health, particularly for the college student demographic. And yeah, pretty much everything in between. So I know there's a lot out there to offer. Again, this information is also on our website, so I'm sure that's the case for other schools that you're looking at. So definitely just go on their website and look at their student organizations or student activities or something like that, and you can find the full list there.
I know this is a hard question to answer, but what would you say the average number of clubs per student is involved in, just on average, based on your personal history, people you know? Because like you said, there's so much variety based on interest, based on, hobbies, based on major. I mean, do you think the average is involved in 3, 5?
Yeah, I would say 3 to 5 is a good range. I think it also depends on the kinds of things that the student is involved in. So like when I was a student, I was part of our multicultural council, Minds Matter, that group that I mentioned, and then some of our performing ensembles for like choir and things like that. But I had friends who were athletes who most, if not all of their free time went to practices and games. So they may have done whatever sport they play, and then like maybe one other club if they had the time. Or it might also depend on the season. So if it's an athlete situation, maybe in their off season, they have more time to be involved in other clubs. So I think it really just depends on what you want your time to look like in college and what you want to do with the time that you have. It'll also depend on your major. And if you add like a double major or a minor or something like that, you'll spend a lot of time in classes and studying. So yeah, just it depends on what you want your experience to look like and where you want to spend your time.
It also depends on how active that club or organization is. I
Right.
mean, you're going to have some that meet very frequently and take up a
Mhm.
lot of time, and then you're going to
Yep.
have others that meet infrequently,
Right.
and it's easier to be involved, obviously, from a time commitment standpoint, for
Yep.
sure.
Absolutely.
Is it very hard to create a new club or a new organization?
It's not hard, actually. We have a process through our student involvement and leadership programs office. So if there's a club or something that you're interested in that we don't offer, there is a process for making that happen. We actually had a student this past year start a new Caribbean Student Association. So that is new to Messiah. So it is possible, it can be done if you're really passionate about whatever group it is that you want to start.
Well, that is all the questions that have come in via the chat.
Okay.
But I was just going to give it one more second in case something popped up. And I don't think so. So thank you so much, Sierra, for your time and your expertise. And obviously your contact information is still here on the screen.
Yes.
But like you said, at starting out, the best thing that any prospective student can do is just do their own research, ask their own questions, follow schools and groups on social media. Just do that research and try to get a sense of that community, try to get a sense of what each university stands for, what they're about, what opportunities they have. And of course, what each student is looking for is going to be different. And that's
Right.
what's great about it. And I think we offer a lot of variety here in the States and in Canada. So it just depends on what they're looking for. And hopefully everybody does their research and finds the best fit for them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And thank you all so much for coming and for your time. Hopefully we can connect at some other point. But yeah, I hope you enjoy this time with NACAP and doing some exploration.
Thanks, Sierra.
All right. Thanks, everyone.